Hello. I am live. Here we go. Good morning. Well, it's not good morning for long, is it? It's going to be lunchtime soon, and then suddenly we'll be talking about afternoon. I'm a bit bright. Sorry about that. I'm a bit bright, but I've put the light on sort of special filters so that you'll get plenty of light when I turn it over to look at the board. I'm going to use, this is burnt umber. Now I'm using tube paints because I want a lot of paint today with what I'm going to do. It's going to be quite a hefty picture paint wise. So let's put plenty on here. That is Prussian blue, lovely dark blue. For a bit of lightness and some warmth, I've picked up, this is very lovely, warm, raw sienna. And then I've got Payne's Grey. Now I won't be using an awful lot of Payne's Grey, so I'm just going to put some up into there, all right? And in addition, other bits and pieces, but we don't worry about that now. Let me introduce them to you as we work our way through it. So here I have a piece of gash paper, and I want to just show you how these paints work. Got dust on the page. All right, if I take, got a bit of a flicker on the screen going now as well. Goodness sake, what's the matter with life today? Is that a bit better? It's a little bit, no, not necessarily. Let's see how we go with it, everybody. Right, if I take, this is Prussian blue, and I spread it about, and I do this with it, it's a lovely colour, it's warm and it's soft. And if I take Payne's Grey and add it, that's not particularly a runner, is it? It doesn't really go mad. And if I take raw sienna, these are the lovely colours, mixes together to make rather an interesting greeny grey. But if I add something like, this is the Prussian blue, and I add this to this, it's a paint that blossoms. And this is the stage when we're talking about really wet work, soaking wet work. This is real, true, dripping wet. So it will run. So that's our first stage. If we wait and we're patient bunnies, this particular demo today is all about timing. Can you see that this is already starting to bleed into the drying paint, and it's causing and creating these blossoming cauliflowers? That is when this is no longer very shiny, and this now is wet, and the wet is running into the damp paint. The shiny paint is running into the damp paint, and this is a particular stage when you can create cauliflowers. And if I were to take a wet brush and I do this, it's going to push the paint away. It's amazing, isn't it? It's going to push the paint away, and suddenly you have this incredible blossom. This is a cauliflower. And that happens when something wet goes into something that is dry or drying, and as a consequence you find that it will push the paint away and it blossoms, which is really quite something. So that is our damp stage. Our damp stage. That is a good stage to go in and to use water like this, and it gives you some stunning effects if you want to come in with wet paint. And when I say wet, I'm talking about sort of single cream thickness, and you can come in and do this, and it will be a soft bleed, a soft bleed. So we have wet into wet, this, we have wet into damp, and then if we allow that to dry just a little bit more and we come into it with paint and we start to paint, this should be soft and it will bleed and you get a soft line and just gentle, gentle movements. All right, so gentle, gentle. And then of course you have the stage that we all know and love, where we come in and we paint wet onto dry. So that gives you an absolutely definite, positive, solid line. All right, so you've got all of these different ways of using your paint. Look at this cauliflower here bleeding into this, but this is soft because these were both wet. So it's just knowing when, just when to go in and when to do something. All right, let's get rid of that. And the next thing we're going to do here with our blank piece of paper is just think about how we want to paint this. And I have to be honest with you, we're going to do something like this. And I'm not going to follow this slavishly, but for today, we're just going to do this organically, and it's going to morph in its own way to be how we want it to be. We're going to look at it as we paint it and decide from there how we're going to work it, okay? All right. So, let us think. The only thing that I want to think about is the fact that realistically I'd like to have two banks coming into the picture. I think I might draw this line here so that you can see where I might have it, and then it would be nice to have something else through across this area here. And realistically I'd like to try and keep this area quite light, because it's always a very, very good idea that when you are drawing and painting, you have somewhere that your viewer can walk into the picture and go into it and go through it. You want them to think that they could just go in. Don't block them off, don't stop them from going in. It's really, really important. The other thing that's quite important is to have darkness in these corners so that you kind of frame your picture. I want to use, the only brushes I'm going to be using today is this lovely hake. This is a goat's hair hake, and a rigger brush, long thin brush, and this is my favourite number 8 sable brush. And the hake brush is fantastic because it's goat but it's springy, and that means that when I paint with it and lift it off the page, it bounces back, it doesn't go floppy. You don't want to have to reshape your brush every time you stroke the page. So it's a good springy brush, and that's where I'm wanting to be. I'd like to have light in the middle of my picture, and I think that what we could do is just have a little play with this maybe. This is my masking fluid, and when you're using this you need a nice trip to a hotel because you're looking for a little bar of soap. And that bar of soap you're going to use to protect your brush from the mask. I'm coming into my soap and I want to soap it like this, and then I'm simply going to dig into my masking fluid, and I just want a couple of little white spots. So somewhere through here I'd like to have some little white grasses, actinic white, paper white. I'm just flicking those through there, and it might be a plan to perhaps have something over here, just little grasses, using the tip of the brush, and I just want those little dots of white paper. And I think for good measure, to balance it up so that we've got the 3, I'm coming in over here with something here. And as a general rule, it's a good idea to pull your anything like this into the picture so that it's not sort of poking out. You don't want it to look outwards, I want it to look in, okay? And that can go away. Do it up so that you don't land up with that flying on the floor. And I'm just going to clean it up a little bit so that I don't pick it up and make a mess in the future, because we've all done that, haven't we? Next thing we want to do here, I want to explain to you that this is Bockingford. It's £140 Bockingford. Nothing spectacular about that, but the most important thing is make sure that you have used good, this is gummed tape, and make sure that you stick it down well, because my paper is now going to be soaking wet and I want to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. I don't want any of this to suddenly land up cockling and coming out. It would be a disaster. I want to wet my page, and I'm going to do the whole thing. This is dry, I know, because I can put my finger on it and nothing happens. I want to soak my whole page like this, so that it is shiny, shiny wet. Shiny wet. Don't be afraid of it, and if it does bow a little bit, don't worry about it. I haven't stretched it. This is effectively going to be my stretch, and as long as I am taped down well, it means that I can keep it safe, and it'll dry drum tight, absolutely drum tight, and that's just what I want it to do. If you look sideways, you can see where you've been and where you haven't been, and some of the areas I can see are still matte, so I've missed them. Come in and make sure you've got them. The other thing I would suggest absolutely is around the edges, make sure it's extra wet, because for some reason it always dries more quickly around the edges of your picture. Warmth and light in the middle, and this is why I wanted my lovely, lovely, soft, warm raw sienna. No, it's not, it's burnt sienna. Raw sienna's a little browner than this. No, Sharon, it's raw sienna. I'm ever so sorry, everybody, it's raw sienna. Being an idiot. See, the problem is, the brain does one thing, and the mouth does something else, and the brush is doing something else, and the three of them don't always work together, which is a bit of a problem, really. But they haven't put me in a home yet, so it's okay. And I'm just going to bring it through the path. So move it around your picture, it's still soaking wet, everything's fine, and as long as it's as wet as that, you don't have a problem with it. Whilst it's still shiny like that, and it's still really, really wet, I want to mix up a little bit of this burnt umber and a little bit of the raw sienna. So I have this kind of colour here, and I'm thinking now distant trees that are a long way away. So if I put them in here, this colour will run and bleed and shatter, and that's fine. That's just what I want it to do. I want something in there, I want something in here. And it doesn't matter if you're going to do this yourself afterwards, it really doesn't matter where you put these. I want you just to put it down and see what happens. Just to enjoy the fact that it's all just working and it's soft. All right, so we've done that. That's going to be trees in the distance, pushed back and away. Now the next thing I really, really want to do here, whilst that's all working and it's all still soaking wet and this is dripping, I need to mix up some burnt umber, and I'm coming into my gorgeous Prussian blue. All right, and with this, wait for it, that's that mixed colour on the brush, and now I'm going to go into my burnt umber, and the burnt umber and the mixed blue, wait for it, I'm going to do this. Blue. Oh, I love the way it does that. That is so exciting. It's just so exciting. I love it. Sorry, can't help it. Can't help it. The girl's mad, but I just love it. Look at the way now that we can make that into a tree in a minute. That's fine. It's the blue that's the blossomer look, and it just goes ka-ching. Love it. Leave all this because that will all look like grasses and mosses and all sorts of exciting things in a bit. I need a little bit more down here. I said to you I want dark, so I'm just going to really come in there with the blue to really make that dark and to make this a little bit more interesting. What happens if we come in with a little bit of Payne's grey? And I'm not cleaning my brush at all, everybody. I'm just going in with the dirt. I'm just going with it. All right. So that's that. I'm going to clean the brush, and then I want to come in on this side and lay something in here. Let's look at this. Let's just have something a little lighter this side. So what happens if we take a little bit of the raw sienna and some burnt umber? This is double loading, everybody. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the blue, the Prussian blue there, and suddenly that becomes triple loading, doesn't it? This will be just a little bit drier now, and I'm going to pull that through, stop, so that you still get this pathway. And then I need to bring the darkness down here again. So again, I'm just coming in with the blue. This is the dark Prussian blue, and I just want to drop a little bit through here. This is too much water and wash, so let me rinse my brush, and I'm going to dab it on my cloth, and I'm coming in there just to pick up some of that. It's still really wet, so I can do that, so just pick up some of the drips. But the important thing about all of this is it's starting to go from soaking, running wet into damp. It's still not quite there, so I'm just going to wait for a minute. Just wait a minute. And this is dishwasher salt, and it's round granules, and I just want to drop one or two hither and yon. Really don't want a lot, because this can give you quite a large effect, and I don't want too much effect. Not at the moment, I don't. This is shiny, but it's not runny anymore. Therefore, I'm going to come in with a bit of blue, and let's add a little bit of this brown to it to take that brightness away. Thin paint, this is fairly thin paint. And now I want trees in the midground. So here we go. If I bring that through now, fir trees. I'm going to sweep it through there a bit. Not going to interfere too much with this because I quite like that. So just, you know, be careful. And then this here, I'm going to just pull it over this tree a little. So these will be distant trees. You can see that that paper is drying there because these lines are more definite. So that's worth thinking about. There we are. And again, I want to clean my brush, get rid of the water from my brush, and just want to pick a little bit more of that out. We can make that actually look like a trunk, in fact. I might paint over that, but we'll see how we go. I've got colour on the brush, residual colour on the brush. Well, hey, what can I do with that? So I might do some of that, just to put another tree in the background there. That's fine. Whilst this is all still wet, this painting is a bit of, don't panic, you know, do it now, do it now, do it now. It's all about timing. This is Schminky. I'll show you when I've closed it again. It's Schminky Gold Powders. I just want to sprinkle a little bit. It's beautiful. It's bronze powder actually. Look, there it is. Schminky. That's a funny name, isn't it? But it's the finest powder, and look at the colour of it. It's exquisite. And when you put it on your picture, that will stick to the paint now. It has a bit of gouache in it, and it'll not gouache, gum arabic, and it sticks to the paint, and as a consequence you get that beautiful glimmer and glitter when you've finished and it's dried. This is a porcupine quill, and you can buy these on eBay. They're as easy as pie. Fishermen use them for fishing for floats. But for you and I, they're really quite useful because when the paper is in this state, if you come in and you just hurt it, useful because you have a thin end and a thick end, and consequently it can be really useful in the wet paper to pull grasses. Bear in mind, everybody, this is a one use only, because if you've made that mark and you regret it, you're up the creek. Seriously, because it's not, you can't go back in and do anything about it. It's there, it's permanent, you've had it. The next thing I want to do here, whilst this is now, the shine is still on some of the paper, so I can still work it. I want to come in now with a real dark. So this is the blue, this is the burnt umber, and now I want my paint thicker. My paint is thicker. And if I mix that, wait for it, and I come in here now and I lay in some trees. Think about where you want them. I like this, but I'm not sure about that shape, so I shall overlay some of that. And this is my dark paint now that I can put in my foreground trees. And it's still not dark enough for me, so I'm going back to the blue, back to the brown, and I want it thick. Let's try that. I can paint over that because I know that that will still shine through white. Let's have a little bit of the Payne's grey and pull that tree up. Now, interesting thing happens with fir trees. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm just having a bit more of the brown on there because this is all a bit blue now. The bottom branches bow, they weep. But as you come up to the top of the tree, you'll find that suddenly they point upwards. So just have a little bit of that. And I want another tree this side, but this time I don't want it to be the same tones and the same colour. Let's change it. So let's rinse some off the brush. And this time I'm going to hit the brush with, poor old brush, look. This is the raw sienna and a bit of the burnt umber and a bit of this blue. And let's see how we go with it. This is drying, so you've got to be a bit careful with this. And I don't want to come down and interfere too much with all of this. So I'm just going to pop that tree in through there. Like this. I'm using the edge of the brush like this, and again just a few. Right, okay, jolly good. So we have bareness over here and over here. Not worried about that, we're going to deal with that in a minute. This is too green, so how about taking some of our blue and just drop some in while it's still wet on the lower branches, and perhaps in the middle of the tree. That's it. So we can do that. So let that bleed, let it blossom, let it work. Some of the salt's working. Salt's a funny old object, you know, because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, and you never know whether it will or it won't, and sometimes it depends on the type of paint that you're using, and it's just a headache, but it's so worth it because you never know what you're going to land up with. And just to try it and just to see where it goes, it really is worth it. I'm just using my rigger brush now, and I have water on the rigger. That's all, not too much, because if I use too much, it might bleed like mad. So I'm just going to dab a little bit off, and let's see, this is now looking quite matte. So if I come through this area, oh yes, look. So rinse it, keep it clean, dab the extra liquid off, and now just pull up some saplings. And they will become ghost trees in the distance, which will look quite interesting. Now that might be, it's too dry down here, but this, you see, is still wet, so I can pull it through. And that's fine because that will make that look as though that tree is in the distance, but it's coming forward, it's coming towards us. So keep that brush not too wet. And there is just a small window of time that you can go in and do this, a small window. So you need to be on it. And see, that's a little bit too dry there, it's not working. So just keep on it. Just watch out, watch for it. It's that moment when if you were to put your finger on the paper, you know it would lift colour and you would get colour on your finger. All right? When it looks dry, but it isn't. So if you were to touch it, it would be an issue. All of these things are just fun to paint. You never know what you're going to land up with, how it's going to work, and that's half the joy of it. I don't want to really know what it's going to do. I want to watch it and I want to see what happens. Whilst it's still dripping wet like this, if you wanted to, you can pull bits out. So you can do that. Not too much, everybody, because sometimes we do go a bit mad with things like that and we land up spoiling it, because the whole beauty of it is the fact that it is as loose as it is, and if we were to make it too contrived, suddenly we lose that beautiful freshness. So I don't want to do that. I wonder if I could lay in some little clear grasses through here with water. Let's see how wet and how dry that is. No, it's too dry, you see. So that's worth knowing, just to see the different areas and what you can get away with. No, it's not liking it, is it? But that's all right. That's part of the learning curve, to see what it will do and how it works. So that's all right. Now, if you wanted to, you could come into this area and you could flick a little, and that's quite fun to get a bit of texture down here as well. And generally, I really like to use my comber for a flick. And a comber, this is a brush where some vandal quite deliberately goes on the, takes a cutter to the top third of the brush and takes out the hairs so that the top of the brush looks like a comb. And with a bit of a credit card or a card, aren't these shops lovely sending us these things? I do love them. I don't use them for shopping, but they're fabulous for your artwork. And if I take this and I take some paint, so what shall we use here? Let's have a little bit of the gold, this raw sienna. And here, if you're doing this, as Denise said yesterday, you need your paint to be milk or single cream. It can't be any thicker than that because you can't get a flick. So we have the raw sienna on my brush, and then I'm going to pick up some of this blue mix. I have both. And if you come in here and we flick a little bit, not too much, but see if you can cover some of the areas where you have some white, just white paper, and bald areas. So when I talk about bald areas here, nothing much is going on here, so let's see if we can make that a bit interesting. And with flicking, it's quite important that if you don't want a teardrop shape, you've got to flick straight down. If you're looking for a teardrop shape, if you flick outwards this way, it will give you a definite pear shape. Whereas to flick straight down, so straight down, will give you just a nice spot. So that's up to you, and you know whether you want that shape or not. We'll have a little bit on the path, teeny bit. You can do this when you're wet or when you're dry, but if it's nice to do both actually. If you do both, it means that you have this lovely sort of softness as you hit it like this here. It's still quite puddly here, and that just softens and melds and blends, which is beautiful. But if you hit it where it's dry, of course you get this very definite spot. So that is up to you, but I love to do that it's very fashionable at the moment, and actually it's a beautiful technique because it just softens the whole picture, makes it look more arty, more painterly, you know, more interesting. So I've got to now wait for this to just calm down because we have done everything that we can do. This is the stage now where we have this kind of warp on the paper, and you know that you've done this, so it's too dry now to really do any more of that. Some areas are still wet. I could work into those with water if I wanted to, but everybody, this is the stage. If you go into that now and you start to fiddle with it, it's a disaster. It really would be a disaster, darling, because it would all move, and it would also, when you started to work that, you'd lift the paint off, you'd get stripes where the brush goes in, and you really, really wouldn't like it very much. That's when the messes occur. Now is the time to just take stock and to wait. So we might put a hairdryer on that in a minute, but I'm just letting it work, just letting it work. This is gorgeous. I love it when it does this, when one colour runs up into another and it gives you this effect here. Really, really enjoy this. I like the way this happens too, because when we remove that salt, and all you have to do is just brush the salt away, and you'll find that that leaves this round blossom with a circle in the middle where the salt was. And that is so exciting as well, because it means that you can then, if you want to, do some stalks and stems. That's a lovely way to do flowers, daisies perhaps, in a grass meadow. Works very, very well. Like that very much. The next thing we need to be doing here is thinking about how we're going to go about putting in some interest, because at the moment it's all very soft, it's muted, and because of that it's kind of pushed it further back. We need to bring some interest into the picture, into the foreground, and to give it some oomph and some focal points, really, you know, somewhere to walk, somewhere to look, somewhere to go. And now is your time to be looking at this picture and thinking about what you don't like. What don't you like? I need something in here. This is too much of a big green blob in the middle. So is this. So we'll be needing to do something with all of that. We need to think about it. And how are we going to deal with it? There are different ways that we can work it. We can come in there with something like this, the white gouache or a white paint, whichever you prefer. You can use a knife and you can cut into it. So that's quite exciting as well. But I want to paint onto it first. I want to paint, and I'm going to introduce some dark, dark trees. So that's my plan. And then we're going to start with, this is my number 8. And now I'm going to hit the Payne's Grey. If you're using Payne's Grey, everybody, the best one, in my humble opinion, is to go for the Winsor & Newton, rather lovely artist watercolour. I really, really, really don't like the cotton. I wouldn't use that at all because it's just grey, it's tarmac. So I want to use, I'm going in here with a number 6 brush, Rosemary's brush, and with this I'm going to paint upwards. Don't paint your trees down. A tree is wide at the, obviously it's wide at the bottom of the trunk, and it gets thinner as it goes up through the tree. So your brush, where you put your brush down to start with, is going to be the widest stroke that you can make. And as you pull it up the picture, it gets thinner. All right? Therefore, do not start at the top and come in, because it makes a thick tree at the top and thin down at the bottom, and it's just it just makes nonsense of all of it. Here I want to come in this side now, and I'm going to lay in. These are all saplings, so if you imagine that you're walking through the scrublands, you're walking through aspen, you're walking through silver birch, because they just, shed seeds like mad, don't they? They're everywhere on all the greens and all the downs. So I need something up through here. So again, thicker at the base, pull it up, make your trees make sense, thicker here and thinner as you come through. So you've got those darker ones there. What happens if I just take water? So I've still got the dirty brush, but I'm just going to dab it because I don't want it too wet. And now if I come through with a pale, pale grey. So that is just water on the brush after the paint. So that's Payne's grey. This is nonsense, look. So we need to make that a little bit thicker so that it makes sense. Again, I'm going to, can I put my finger on there? Probably. I'm going to pull something up through there. That is behind this tree. And then there might be something up through here. And everything is saying, look. It's all leaning in, saying, look, come and look down our path. Come and walk down our path. I need some more of this up through here. So again, coming up through, thicker down here, like this. And I would like to, so that again is leaning out. I'm uncomfortable with that. So I need to come back through here and pull something through this area here too. All these little whippy. And again, water on the brush, get rid of the drip. And I can put something even further in the distance through there. So you've got a little stand there of teeny tiny saplings going off into the distance, and you could potentially walk through them, through that area there. Something up through here in that pale, pale grey. So this is still that one brush full of Payne's grey, but just water. And it gives you these fine, fine little trees. I hope you're not too hungry. Are you all right? I don't mean to witter too long at you today, but it's such fun. I don't want to leave it alone. Right, so that gives us depth in our picture now. We can see, we can look, we can see this forest arriving. Where I live here, we've got lots of scrub land. It used to be used by the army when they were here. As a consequence, lots of lovely areas like this to walk in, broadleaf and fir trees, so really rather good. Now then, what I want to do with this now is develop these a little more. I can't do that with this thick brush, this number 6. I need to come into my rigger brush, this fine rigger brush. Rigger brush was developed by Turner to paint the rigging on ships because you need a lovely brush that will draw you a thin line. And this time I'm coming into the Payne's grey, and I need my paint to be single cream thickness. So work it well to make sure you've got the right thickness. And the same applies from the tree trunk up like this. So just pull it up and pull it through. Make this make sense. There we are. Series of little ticks coming from the tree. Make sure it all joins up. Pull it through. Pull it through. That doesn't join up. Don't like it. This tree, I want to pull that over and through a bit more. This is not thick enough here, so laying the brush down on its side, I can do that. And then I can get hold of this and I can pull a branch through here. Join it up. This tree has, bless it, shed a seed, and we have another sapling just coming up through here. So again, this gives us this progression through the picture, this idea of distance. Everything's stretching, reaching for the light, it's reaching. Here, pull this over. We don't want to make it look like a Johnny Depp forest, you know, from one of his horror films, but I want to do this to balance this little tree up, because at the moment it's just teetering and that won't do. So pull that through, pull this through. And just keep going. If you find it difficult to do this cack-handed sort of pulling it through this way, don't worry about it. Turn your whole painting round, turn the whole thing round up the other way, and then you'll find that you can work downwards, pull your lines down. So that works very well. Done that on many an occasion. Because it can, I mean, cack-handed really is the right way to describe it, isn't it? I mean, it can be really, really difficult. So, through here. I'd be very interested to know actually if it's any more difficult for left-handers than it is for me being right-handed. So answers on a postcard please, I'd be very interested. There we go. This tree as well, how about, let's have some more paint, a bit more water. How about this tree too? This is all something or nothing here, isn't it? Look, nothing's happening. So what would happen if this little tree had had a sapling too? There we go. So we're making that area look more interesting. Bring it down, forward into that area there. So that's more interesting. The roots, you can leave a gap, pull a bit, and then pull that through. Like so. So that makes that look a little more interesting, a little more grounded, so that works. And then you can look at your trees and think, is it all right? Am I happy with the bases of my trees? Well, actually, at the moment, I really am, but I'd like to show you what to do with something if you weren't. So hold on a minute, let's just introduce something else. So through here, I just want to pull something up through there. And if you didn't like this stubby base here that I've produced quite deliberately, just take your brush, so back to number 8 or 6, water, get rid of the drip, because I want a damp brush but not a soaking wet brush, and come into it like this and just nudge it. Keep it clean and just nudge it and get hold of the roots and pull them. So that's all you've got to do to get rid of that nasty, nubby, snubby bottom of that particular tree. All right. This one will ground a little more. We're going to do this a different way. You could, if you want to, smudge and nudge that just to soften it, put a shadow underneath it. That's all you've got to do. But with trees like this, it's a really good idea to put some grasses and what have you in there to make them more interesting. One other technique I'd like to show you, using a hard brush. Now here I've got a little sort of flat, hard brush here. And with water, again, not too wet everybody, if you wanted to, you can now pull up a negative tree. So come through, scumble it. So if you didn't get very much out of this technique here, you can now pull it through. Now that brush is just damp, so keep it clean, keep it fairly dry, and come in. And leave your brush marks because they make it interesting. And where I'm coming out from the dark into the light, gosh, this sounds like a science fiction movie, doesn't it? Just use the colour that you've got. Because it's really important to know that with watercolour and with any kind of painting, you have to have light against dark, light against dark, and dark against light. So where you've got that transfer there, you have to go from a light trunk to a dark trunk. So that's really, really important. So up through here. So again, pull your line through so that you have the light tree. Keep it clean. Get rid of the water. So you have the light tree through here. And because I'm pushing the paint, I will land up with this lovely dark edge, which is really, really quite exciting. And then pull that up through, and suddenly we've got dark paint against light. And that is a lovely, lovely way to put in some supplementary trees. If you have an area like this where it's not particularly interesting, come up again, we'll do something here too. So scrub it. I'm going to put that down behind this tussock. Scrub it, pull it, yank it, do what it takes, and then pull it out into the light area. I just love the way a picture like this morphs. You don't really know where you're going with it when you start, and I think that's half the fun. I really think that's half the fun. So pull it, pull it, pull it. There we go. Now whilst we're doing this, the paints I'm using Shinhan, which are Korean, and they are watercolor, professional artist watercolour from Jackson's. I'm using the masking fluid. I have the masking fluid. You can get that from my shop, but the SAA do it too. Now I want to lighten and brighten some of my dark trees because they're lost in the miasmic fog of my forest. Two ways we can do this. Imagine your light's coming in through here and it's shining on this side of the trunk, and I could come in and I could gently lift some colour out in the same way that I've done over here with this. Again, just a damp brush, pick it up, pull it, pull it, pull it. There we are. So we can do that. If you're not too impressed with that and you think that that's a bit all something or nothing, that's all right, doesn't matter. What we're going to do is just use some white gouache. Now this is quite interesting because white is monstrous in your palette. I don't know what it is, but there's some kind of chemical reaction that goes in your palette, and the next thing you know is you've got this horrible white mark in there. You can't get it out, and it just leaves this chalky residue forever. Don't do that. Hey, look at this. I've got a little cat who's addicted, totally addicted to cat milk. And so thank you very much, Socks. I use the tops of the cat milk. You could use bottle tops, so that would work. But here we're using this, and now again I need it to be single cream. And choices are here. You can either paint, let's put it there so you can see it. You can either paint directly onto your tree. Oh, not too much. Look, get rid of the majority of it. So you can paint it directly onto your tree. And against the dark areas, you could pull through some lighter tree trunks, some lighter branches. So that's doable. If you find that too ferocious, there's no problem with that. Just take a brush, a damp brush, and on the side away from the light, on this side, I'm trying to do this so that I'm not in your way. Just pull some water through so that it softens it. So you can do that. That's a lovely effect. Be aware though that with watercolour, as with all of this and with the gouache, my goodness, it does fade out. So just be aware that that will happen. So you can do that, and in some of the areas where you've got grasses or you'd like some more grass, just take the gouache, the white paint, and just flick out So I like to do that and then come into the base and just rub it so that you get rid of the harshness of the stubby business down the bottom of the trunk. So where I've got those brush strokes there, just come in, and that's enough just to ground it and to soften it. There we go. So that gives us a few little trees. And what we've got to do now is look at these areas where we've put our masking fluid. And to get it away from the page, this is, again, a little tip from the SAA. This is a mask away. Oh, it's brilliant. It's like the rubbers, it's not rubber, it's the crepe soles that we used to have on our shoes. Some shoes still do. And if we use this on here, it brings off the masking fluid so easily, and all of it. Because the problem with using your finger is very often it doesn't bring it all away. And here, like that, and I had some over here, didn't I? And it all comes away, it doesn't land up on the carpet. You get these bits on here that you can pick off, and it keeps the house clean too. Okay, so that's fine, but again, look, don't like all these hard edges down here. Don't worry. Damp brush. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to nudge the colour back up into my masking fluid. So just get hold of it and gently, gently nudge, budge and smudge. That well-known firm of solicitors. There we are. And into here as well. Gently, gently, gentle hands, gentle fingers. And that will do that for you like that. If you'd like to have a few residual winter leaves on your trees, it's quite nice to do a bit of flicking. Use the brighter colour so that it looks like it's rusty leaves that have been left from the autumn. So I would take this is the raw sienna, and I would just flick a few around the trees to make it look as though they still were hanging on to a few of their autumn leaves, and that gives you something else of interest to look at the top of the page. And then finally look at it, and the final tweak would be to look at the areas that have no interest, and I would load my brush. I'm going to use this greeny blue, and now I'm just going to think to myself through here, ground it through here, leaning over the path, leaning over the path. These little grasses that might be there, and they're going to brush against you as you walk through. Something here on the base of this tree. I don't know what it is about rabbits. They don't tend to eat the grass round trees, do they? And round, I know why they don't eat it round rocks. Somebody said to me that standing stones and things, the rocks have minerals in them, and the rabbits don't like them, so that's why they don't tend to eat around the base of rocks. That's interesting, isn't it? So over here, just to give you something to look at through here, there we go. And finally, if you wanted to, you could use your little tiny, this flat brush and come into, I'm going to use a bit of the gold. This is the raw sienna, a bit of the mixy mud and a bit of the blue, and you can come through and you can just introduce just use the side of the brush, a bit more of the blue, a couple of branches of fern, lady fern, coming through So if you were to do a couple of those, so again, bit of the blue, bit of the gold. And I'm simply using the shape and the size of the brush to make that interesting, to give you something through this corner to pull your eye. So we've got the dark areas through both. Bit of the white might be interesting in there actually. And that is how I would be dealing with my woodland scene. Thank you so much everybody for joining me for this afternoon. It's been lovely, lovely to have you with us.